can do no wrong.
Trump can do no wrong.
That's right.
So are you someone who would call yourself a Republican, or are you
Definitely Republican.
definitely Republican? So
But not a Republican that likes the elite Republicans.
So-
That's what attracts me to Trump.
So then in that thread, Trump right now is in a little hot water with the people who are of the Republican Party because he doesn't know that he wants
Those
to
are the
endorse-
elite Republican Party that he's in trouble with.
Right. So
Not
he
the
doesn't-
regular Republican Party like me, the mainstream blue-collar, white-collar type people that are with Trump.
One of Donald Trump's remarkable feats is that he has successfully cast himself as the anti-elite champion of the working man, despite his private planes and his gold-plated Manhattan penthouse. And one of the most striking things about Trump's campaign, particularly in this current cycle, where the candidate seems to be locked in a mode of self-destruction, is how high the floor of his support is. For Trump's base, it doesn't seem to matter what he says or does. They have found the guy who gets them, who speaks for them. For example, after the Republican National Convention, polling found that white women, college-educated whites, independents, and young voters were less likely to vote for Trump. That's after the convention. The only groups who told Gallup they were more likely to vote for Trump after the convention, 52% of white men and 52% of white non-college graduates. Neoconservative Max Boot lamenting in the New York Times in an op-ed titled "How the Stupid Party Created Donald Trump," even if we could avoid the calamity of a Trump presidency, the GOP still has a lot of soul-searching to do. Mr. Trump is as much a symptom as a cause of the party's anti-intellectual drift. The party needs to rethink its growing anti-intellectual bias, its reflexive aversion to elites. Catering to populist anger with extremist proposals that are certain to fail is not a viable strategy for political success. Joining me now is J.D. Vance. His incredible new book, Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir of a family and culture in crisis, documents firsthand how a portion of America feels abandoned and alienated. It's the portion he comes from. J.D., thanks for joining me. Really like the book.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So you write about growing up in southeastern Ohio and part of Appalachia. You write about your firsthand experience with a subsection of the white working class, we should be clear, geographically, in some ways ethnically bound Scots-Irish part of that white working class. But I think it's fair to say that the part that has been the most fervent Trump support, both in the primaries and in both demographically, how do you understand this connection between the folks that you came from and that support for Trump?
Sure. So I think it's a couple things. So I think first is a matter of tone. It's really important to note that Trump doesn't just say certain things, but he conducts himself in a certain way, right? So he's not afraid to shoot from the hip, to be offensive, to say what's on his mind. And I think for folks who see in the elites and in people like Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, someone who's just not relatable, they're not like we are, they don't talk or think like we do, Donald Trump is very refreshing in that way. The other side, I think, is that for many years, the Republican elites, the part of the party that really drives policy, has pushed a combination of tax cuts, deregulation, free trade. Those policies, whatever their merit as matters of good government, have not addressed, I think, a very real social crisis that's going on in the white working class. So if you think about rising opioid addiction rates, the lowering of the life expectancy, declining jobs, and so forth, I think there's a sense that the Republican policy platform is just really not addressing the concerns of the people who are voting Republican.
That, I think, is the most significant substantive thing to come out of this. I want to go back to something you said, though, before we talk about it. You talk about relatability in Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, and you know, a lot of people are going to say this is about race, fundamentally. We're talking about folks that are white. Sure. We're talking about folks who, in poll after poll, show higher levels of racial animus when you ask them a bunch of questions about prejudice or do blacks face worse discrimination than whites. How much is it, in your view, about race, about seeing the Democratic coalition as fundamentally being a non-white coalition?
Well, I think it's important to note that definitely some of it is about race. And I don't think you can be honest and deny that some of it is, but I don't think most of it's about race. And so there's this interesting question about when you poll people and they express higher levels of racial animosity or a variety of views that might be described, if not as racist, at least as expressing some sort of racial resentment. What I see in those polls is frankly that they're following Donald Trump, not that Donald Trump is following them. Huh. I think this is a really important and frankly a very unfortunate part of the Donald Trump phenomenon. It's not just that he's found a way and he's found a way into these voters' hearts and into their political preferences. He's actually, I think, leading people in a certain way, and he's leading our political discourse to a very negative place. So I think that's an important part to recognize. I really don't think that this is significantly, he's just appealing to a bunch of racist Republicans. I think it's more that he's dragged the conversation downward a little bit.
That is a very interesting idea, and it opens up a possibility of, could you imagine someone who could find a way to give voice to these folks that was explicitly anti-racist or was promoting a socialist agenda or something that was completely out of the box of essentially conservative or Republican or nationalistic sentiments? Is that a possibility in your mind?
So I definitely think it's a possibility. I think over the short term, I don't expect much to happen with the Democratic Party on that front. I think the cultural disconnect is just a little bit too great. If you remember a few weeks ago where Hillary Clinton, I think, was worried about climate change, but she made a comment about putting coal miners and putting coal businesses out of work. At the end of the day, that just seems really tone deaf to a lot of people.
Right.
And I think that ultimately, while I think that a politician like that could come along, I think that the modern Democratic Party in this 2016 election cycle has probably gone a little bit too far and is not really going to be able to peel a big part of Trump's support away.
Well, that I would agree with. I mean, those coalitions are pretty set. The book is called Hillbilly Elegy. I've been making about halfway through it. It's a really fantastic read. It's really eye-opening. It's a great piece of work. You should check it out. J.D. Vance, thank you very much.
Thank you.